Ladies and gentlemen, Americans of all political stripes, what we witnessed at the West Point commencement was not a moment of inspiration. It was not a patriotic tribute to our soldiers. It was a blunder, a calculated, divisive, and deeply inappropriate speech that left many in the military community stunned. Donald Trump, at what should have been a nonpartisan military graduation, delivered what can only be described as a political diatribe, a speech that prioritized ego over country, grievance over unity, and spectacle over service. Let's unpack why this was not only a disaster, but a moment of serious concern for the integrity of our armed forces and the future of civil-military relations in America. West Point isn't just any college. It's not a campaign stop. It is one of the most respected military institutions in the world. The cadets who graduate from there have committed to lead, to protect, and, if necessary, to give their lives for this nation. Traditionally, speeches at West Point are about honor, sacrifice, leadership, and service to a cause greater than oneself. They're designed to inspire, not inflame. They emphasize unity, not division. Donald Trump ignored that tradition. Instead, he used the moment to push an agenda that centered on cultural division, political attacks, and a complete rewriting of his own track record as commander-in-chief. Trump opened his speech by referencing his so-called rebuilding of the military. That's debatable, but more problematic was what followed. He went on to criticize past ideological military experiments, a clear swipe at previous administrations without naming names, while trying to paint himself as the savior of a military that he claims was weakened by inclusivity and liberal ideals. He used terms like wokeness and openly mocked DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, suggesting that they were a threat to our national defense. He called DEI a poison, a sickness, and something he had eradicated from the military. Not only is that categorically false, it's deeply insulting to the countless service members who identify as LGBTQ+, people of color, or anyone who doesn't fit Trump's idealized vision of the military. These are men and women who serve honorably, who bleed and die under the same flag as everyone else.
Why are we wasting our time, money, and souls in some cases? They sent our warriors on nation-building crusades to nations that wanted nothing to do with us, led by leaders that didn't have a clue in distant lands, while abusing our soldiers with absurd ideological experiments here and at home. All of that's ended, you know, all of it's ended. It's ended strongly, I think. They're not even allowed to think about it anymore. They subjected the armed forces to all manner of social projects and political causes, while leaving our borders undefended and depleting our arsenals to fight other countries' wars. We fought for other countries' borders, but we didn't fight for our own border, but now we do. The job of the U.S. Armed Forces is not to host drag shows, to transform foreign cultures, but to spread democracy to everybody around the world at the point of a gun. The military's job is to dominate any foe and annihilate any threat to America, anywhere, anytime, and any place.
Then came the boasting. He announced a parade in his own honor, on his birthday, framed as a tribute to the military's 250th anniversary, but unmistakably centered around himself. And finally, he turned what should have been an empowering moment for graduating cadets into a rallying cry for his base. He weaponized the moment to shore up support for his 2024 campaign, signaling clearly that this wasn't about them. It was about him. Trump's war on DEI isn't new, but bringing it into a military graduation is a new low.
The new word is progressive. They don't like using the word liberal anymore. That's why I call them liberal. But whatever you are, you know, most importantly, you have to have common sense, because most of it's, most of it's about common sense when you get right down to it. And we have a lot of people with a lot of very smart people, but they have to have common sense. And we've liberated our troops from divisive and demeaning political trainings. There will be no more critical race theory or transgender for everybody forced onto our brave men and women in uniform or on anybody else for that matter in this country.
Let's be clear, diversity in the military isn't some liberal conspiracy. It's a proven asset. Studies conducted by the Department of Defense itself show that diverse teams perform better, that when service members are treated with respect, regardless of gender, race, or sexual orientation, unit cohesion improves, morale improves, retention improves. Removing DEI programs doesn't strengthen the military, it sets it back. Diversity initiatives aren't about lowering standards. They're about giving everyone an equal opportunity to meet those standards. They ensure that leadership is reflective of the force it commands. Trump, by equating inclusion with weakness, sends a chilling message that service members who don't fit a narrow mold are somehow less valuable. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous. The military is supposed to be apolitical, period. One of the most sacred norms in American democracy is that our armed forces remain neutral. They don't take sides in elections. They don't serve political parties. They serve the Constitution. Trump's speech shattered that norm. By inserting campaign rhetoric, targeting political enemies, and promoting his own narrative, Trump turned a federal military event into a partisan soapbox. And in doing so, he forced future Army leaders to silently witness the politicization of their profession. This isn't the first time. From deploying National Guard troops to clear protesters for a photo op in 2020, to suggesting the military could intervene in domestic politics, Trump has repeatedly shown a disregard for the line between civilian leadership and military independence. The world watches these moments. What do our allies think when they see a former president use a military stage to preach division? What do our adversaries think when they hear America's leadership denounce its own people over identity politics? And what message does this send to young Americans considering military service? That if you're gay, trans, a woman, or a person of color, your service might be questioned, your value diminished. That military culture is reverting to exclusion over evolution. We're at risk of sending the wrong message at the worst time.
Decided to sell. He was offered a lot of money by a big conglomerate, Gulf and Western, big conglomerate. They didn't do real estate. They didn't know anything about it, but they saw the money he was making. They wanted to take it to a public company. And they gave him a lot of money, tremendous amount of money, more money than he ever thought he'd get. And he sold his company, and he had nothing to do. He ended up getting a divorce, found a new wife. Could you say a trophy wife? I guess we could say a trophy wife. It didn't work out too well. But it doesn't work out too well. I must tell you, a lot of trophy wives doesn't work out. But it made him happy for a little while at least.
If you watch the ceremony, one thing was obvious. The crowd wasn't energized. Cadets sat with straight faces, many visibly uncomfortable. Why? Because they knew. They knew the moment was being hijacked. They understood the solemnity of what was supposed to be a milestone in their lives. And instead of being honored, they were props in a political performance. Their silence was not apathy. It was respect for the office, for the institution, and for their future roles as leaders who are supposed to rise above politics. The presidency is a position of service, not self-glorification. It's supposed to be bigger than one person, and it sure as hell is supposed to respect the apolitical nature of the military. This speech showed us what Trump still doesn't understand, or worse, what he deliberately rejects. When you treat the military like a campaign backdrop, you undermine its independence. When you treat DEI like a threat, you insult the very people who make our military strong. When you treat a commencement speech like a rally, you turn leadership into performance. America needs real leadership. Leadership that unites, that uplifts, that understands the gravity of sending young men and women into harm's way. We didn't see that at West Point. We saw a spectacle, a disaster, and a warning.